A problem that a number of people have is that they can't go see a therapist or a counselor or sometimes even a life coach because they are someone who is very energy sensitive. Perhaps they're a medium, perhaps they are a psychic, clairvoyant, um, have some kind of gifts that are still considered strange. And mainstream therapists, mainstream coaches, even working with IFS, internal family system, and parts. I was talking to someone in a group and mentioned about being psychic, and they said, well, all parts are welcome. In that tone of voice, like, you might be crazy, but it's okay because even the crazy parts are welcome. But if you are a psychic or a clairvoyant or a telepath or an animal communicator or a medium, you're not crazy. And those gifts can be part of something that's going on with you that's difficult, that's hard for you to handle. It's very hard to find a spiritual person who does all the weird stuff. I say weird, meaning it very nicely, but who is also educated and trained in real life, grounded human behavior tools and concepts. You might work with somebody who knows about the strange stuff, but if they don't do it themselves, then it's very hard for them to understand the interactions of energies. IFS, internal family systems, and parts work is the first time I've heard mainstream psychology refer to the fact that there are entities that are not part of our system, as they call it, meaning there are beings from other planets, other galaxies, other dimensions. Some are malevolent, some are harmless, like ticks. Some of them have a big agenda. Some of them are just blocking things on you, just like if you had, again, a tick and it was bothering you and you think you have a problem with your head and something is going on with your head, and then you find out it's just a tick. IFS also works with the idea that we have spirit guides that are also entities, but they are beings that are here either from another life or we're connected to them through some kind of soul chain. And they're real and they have their own mind, their own agenda, their own way of looking at things, their own way of helping. If you are a person who is aware of these kind of beings, that you talk to guides, you're aware of entities being on you, you see entities, which I do. Most of them are not very pretty. Most of them to me are on the level of ticks. They are not intelligent, malevolent beings. I've met a few that are, but only a few. And that could possibly be that if you are possessed by an entity with a real big agenda, you might be in a mental institution or you might have medicated yourself beyond the point of help because it can be that disruptive to have something on you like that. So I know for myself that whenever I went for counseling of some kind, it was impossible because the ideas of what I do were tolerated nicely, gently, like, you're okay, and one day you won't think that you're psychic or clairvoyant, and you'll be okay then. Which I hate that tone of voice from therapists. It drives me crazy. So I think people, when they come to work with me, aside from those that find their gifts and they're so excited to find out they do feel things, they can work with energy. We are all telepathic to some degree. You don't have to be on the autistic spectrum if you know about the telepathy tapes, which I've just talked about recently. You don't have to be a weirdo to be telepathic or clairvoyant. Lots of people have had experiences like mothers who know when their infant child who can't talk is suddenly rolled over and can't breathe, or they know when their child's in trouble, and twins very often know what's going on with each other. So for the general population, none of this stuff is strange, but in the psychiatric and psychology and counseling and probably life coach community, I have found they are not equipped to work with integrating those kind of gifts into being a functional human being. And how do you how do you set boundaries with an energy being? You can't necessarily use words. Sometimes you can, because there's an energy behind words. But if you are energy sensitive, you can work with boundaries before you ever enter into a room. And I'm not talking about shielding, which is a new age thing that you can learn very easily. You can do that is definitely a good tool, but that is different than setting up boundaries. It's different than connecting with someone or a group before you even walk into a room. How do you learn to do that? How do you learn to regulate your energy when there's someone else's energy is interfering with yours or combining with yours? How do you keep energies separate? How do you blend energies? These are all things that I work with people in groups and on an individual level. And I was lucky enough to have a number of shamanic type people to work with me one-on-one for years. In my 20s, I had my spiritual parents who were in their 70s. The man would sit, his name was Walter, would sit in silence, and I would lay on a massage table, and it was like a psychedelic trip. Not a word was spoken, except once in a while he'd say, look over to your left, or we're going to lift this veil. And I would come out and my face would be completely changed. The bones in my face would be changed. So from my 20s, now being in my 70s, I was able to work in person and very closely with people like that, including medicine people from the First Nations people, and not just going to peyote ceremonies, but living with and traveling with a medicine man and his family to really understand what it's like to live with a foot in each world. So if you're someone who's having problems or challenges, or you feel lost, or you just need some validation that you're not crazy, it is very hard to find someone with a foot heavily planted in both worlds, the unseen world and the world of psychology, which I do love because there are wonderful tools there, especially if you have been raised by parents that weren't particularly present, parents that were substance abusers, parents that lived through hardship, which is more my parents lived through a very rough time in the Cold War and being immigrants and living through the McCarthy era. Some of you might have parents that came over on a boat or have been persecuted, or maybe you grew up in extreme poverty. These things affect how our parents were able to parent us. So if we didn't get great parenting, we're missing a lot of skill sets. The other thing about this of having a foot in each world is, if you believe in reincarnation, which I do, wasn't raised to believe any of this. I was raised an atheist, and all of this kind of came and got me until I saw my way through it, got my own belief system. How do you determine if what's happening to you that's really hard is something that was scheduled to happen in your life because it's your life path? Like you were supposed to have cancer for 2 years because it's going to teach you a certain lesson, or you're supposed to have some poverty for 5 years. Versus your life sucks right now because you're doing something wrong. You don't have people skills. You are treating your body badly. You get into trauma bonds with lovers instead of healthy relationships. So working with someone who can distinguish between you have a psychological issue versus you have a life path issue. And a life path issue is like, you're supposed to be climbing in the Himalayas right now and you're wearing a bikini and flippers and a snorkel, and that's why your life is hard. When I learned to do readings, like really seriously, I did them for about 15 years. I was like, yeah, that's really cool, and I really didn't know what it was. But then when I got serious about it, it kind of saved my life because I was in the middle of a 9-year cycle of torture. I called it the reverse Midas touch. Everything I touched turned to poo instead of to gold. And I saw from readings, a couple of different methods, that I had another 4 years to go of hell. And it wasn't me. And part of what was torturing me was, what's wrong with me? Why is my life going so badly? There's something wrong with me. Well, it turned out, no, there was nothing wrong with me. I was just in a rocky road across the desert with no water and very little help and a hot burning sun, and life was going to be really freaking hard. Knowing that, I changed my life strategy, which is I made my life very, very small. I didn't try to do anything big and new. I didn't try to get expansive. Instead, I did a lot of learning and a lot of healing. And I also focused on, instead of the pain of what was happening, I started to focus on, what am I learning because of this pain? And I know that can sound weird, but if any of you know cancer survivors, every cancer survivor I've met so far, now I'm sure there's exceptions, but the ones I have met so far have told me that without a doubt, it was the best thing that ever happened to them. Of course, they said this after it was over. They said it was the best thing ever because it changed their life for the better. It changed their priorities. It changed what was important. It changed their sensitivities. Now, would anybody, once you're in a human body, vote to say, oh, I'd love to have cancer for 5 years so I get softer and more open? No. But when you are a ball of light, sitting around with other balls of light, deciding to come back here, you said with your guides, I'd like to get really successful or work really hard and then get cancer for 4 years, because then I'll have the challenge of seeing what do I make of that experience and see if I could, instead of getting bitter and defeated, instead it opens me up into being a bigger, better, more expansive person. And we all go, yay, that sounds like a great idea. Just like when I taught college, freshman year, everybody's like, college, so great. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. 6 months in, they're like, what the hell? I'm never going to get through this. It's so hard. So here we all are, ball of light, going, yeah, cancer sounds great. And then we get here and we go through it, and it's like, what was I thinking? So readings can really help us understand the cancer is not your fault. The cancer is not going to define you in some bad way. And let's look at why on earth you as a soul would have chosen to put this into your life at this point. What were you hoping to get out of it? And how can you get the good stuff out of it? Psychology also comes in then with helping you with the depression and the grief and the anxiety that will also happen. Because when you're a ball of light making a plan, it looks so good. When you're doing it in a human body, you have real emotions and real issues. And part of doing it in a human body is only by going through the experience physically and emotionally and spiritually do we change and grow. When you're a ball of light, we don't have all of that input. It's just kind of more etheric, more of an epiphany and an understanding. But for our atoms to change, for our energy field to change, we come down here to go through experiences. So mainstream psychology cannot separate that out for you, cannot say, listen, right now, your life should be great. So you are way off track, making your life hard for yourself. And once we shape that up, things are going to be really good. I've done readings like that for people, and they've been kind of skeptical at first, and then within a few months going, oh, wow, yeah, it's like, here's this trail with solar lights and a handrail and vistas to look out, and yes, it's uphill, but it's beautiful. But I instead went over here to the rock climbing part with no lights, no safety rails, no vistas, and I'm climbing. So either way, you're going to get to the same point of evolution. One way is much harder than the other, and you don't have to take that super hard way when we find out that there is a path open for you. But this has to be done through the spiritual arts. This can't be done through mainstream psychology. A lot of people who are very spiritual want to fix everything with spirituality. Well, if everything was going to be fixed with spirituality, why on hell do you think you incarnated into a human body that sweats and smells and poops and gets fat and doesn't get fat and sleeps and doesn't sleep? If we were meant to do everything with energy, everything spiritual, everything without feeling too much discomfort, I sincerely doubt you would have incarnated. We came here in this human body with 5 senses, a left brain and a right brain, for reasons. And everybody's reasons are very specific to them. So something to think about if you've tried therapists, you've tried even 12-step, which I love. Sometimes that's not enough, because how can you share about some of your experiences? So far, I haven't seen a 12-step program for telepaths or psychics or healers or mediums. So sometimes it's hard to bring that material even into 12-step programs. If you are one of those people who have equal issues with earth and spirituality, you might try giving me a call. I've had to work on those issues for myself, and I'd like to say that I walk my talk. One of the problems I do have with therapists is many therapists have not done much healing work on themselves. Typically, I believe the requirement is like a year of therapy. I don't know if it's more for different kinds of licenses. And once again, I got interrupted by a call. I don't get called all day until I make videos. So backing up a little, because I'm not going to edit. I'd like to think that I walk my talk, and I have noticed that most therapists have not been in much therapy. Most of them have not gone to a 12-step meeting. They do not meditate. When I try to go through some of their history with them or get a sense of their lifestyle, I don't meet a lot of therapists that do that kind of work. And I personally want to work with somebody who has a spiritual practice, and I want to work with somebody who eats healthy, and I want to work with somebody who has had to learn psychology skills for themselves, inner parenting, parts work, boundary setting, codependency, etc. I don't want to work with someone who just came out of school. Just like I don't want to work with just a spiritual person whose every answer has something to do with my chakras or the Pleiades or, some unknown guide who I can't feel, touch, verify, or sense, who is going to tell me the future. I can tell you I've spent years getting readings and no one can read my chart. And that has given me, ammunition or fuel for me to learn spiritual arts for myself. If you have a very complicated spiritual chart, if you have a Grand Cross or very challenging obstacles in your life, it's really hard for people to read your life charts, not just me. My life is very challenging that way. I will say that in all the years of doing readings, which has been on and off, about 50 years worth, I think I've done readings for about 5 muggles, normal people, normal problems, normal lives. They just don't come see someone like me. They don't need to. And mostly they come for a reading to find out if they're getting their new job or if their kid's going to get into the right college or is their person a good person for them. And then once they get their earth plane questions or desires sorted out, they're gone. That's the end of it. So if you've been having trouble getting readings, you're a little disgusted with the New Age spiritual billion-dollar unregulated industry, which you can tell I don't like that industry at all. I stopped liking it in my 30s, left it in my 30s. And you're frustrated with finding a therapist that you can be totally honest with without being afraid that you'll get institutionalized. You might think about coming to a group at Life Path Healings on Zoom or working with me one-on-one. And I do see people in person if you're in the area. And hopefully I'm going to get back to running 1- and 2-day workshops. And if you're out of town, it might be worth coming into town for a 2-day workshop. I hope this helps. And want to once again recommend the Holistic Psychologist for straight out psychology. Great information, great videos, great self-healers circle, monthly work that you can do yourself on her wonderful platform. And that's all the recommendations I have for now. In the meantime, take good care of yourself. Don't always think it's your fault. Also, don't go the other way and think you had nothing to do with it. See if you can get strong enough inside to start looking at the whole picture. And that means how is your soul evolving as well as how you're doing as a human. I hope this helps and hope to see you in the future.